of concern for Nigerians. After many years of counterinsurgency, Nigeria's government have adopted a soft approach alongside military offensives to winning the war against insurgency. One of such approaches is the institutional Deradicalisation program. While the practice is still in existence, security watchers are worried over the effectiveness of this program. They say it is characterized by the difficulty of balancing the treatment of repentant Boko Haram militants and ameliorating the conditions of insurgency victims. Well, tonight, let's get the perspective of a security consultant and CEO Conflict Security and Development Consult Limited, Group Captain Sadeeq Shehu, retired. Good evening, Group Captain. Thank you very much for coming on Politics Tonight.
Good evening, and to everybody and to the viewers.
Thank you. So I want us to start this conversation by examining the prospects of Nigeria's de-radicalization program, because many consider this institution as one soft approach, but the question has been, do these programs work at all? How effective are they? And it's important for me to lead this conversation that way, because in this country we've seen instances where Boko Haram members have dropped their weapons, instances where they have publicly renounced these groups. They swore by the Quran, but it ends up being a deceitful and wasteful adventure. Operation Safe Corridor is our best example. This initiative was with a view to, facilitating the rehabilitation and reintegration of the ex-insurgents. So again, how effective are these programs?
Thank you very much. But permit me to say, before we talk of how effective it is, permit me to say it is also important because of the concerns raised by many Nigerians, raising very genuine questions. It is important to understand why the de-radicalization, disarmament, demobilization is even necessary. In conflict, there are two types of conflict. There's conflict that is called international conflict, where country A is fighting country B. Then there is the non-international armed conflict, where the two sides are government forces, but the adversary or the enemy are internal citizens of that country. Now, in international armed conflict, like the one we're having, the most common one we can remember now is Russia versus Ukraine. To end such a war, it is very easy. At the end of it all, there will be an instrument of surrender that will be signed, or one country will be captured, and then at the end, they will say, Russia, take your own prisoners of war, let them go back to your country. Ukraine, take your prisoners of war that we have, and that is the end of the fight. Unfortunately, in a non-international armed conflict, like Boko Haram, where Nigeria is fighting, Nigerian security forces are fighting Nigerian citizens, it is very difficult. We don't have this neat way of finishing a non-international armed conflict. Generally, an insurgency like the Boko Haram will end in 1 or 6 ways. First, it could be a military defeat. That is, the government forces have completely annihilated Boko Haram. Unfortunately, we have not attained that. In other places, when you don't have military defeat, you go into a political settlement, a peace agreement, which may even involve this amnesty or the radicalization, demobilization, and the rest. A third way is that, which is an unfortunate one, but it has happened in other places, is that the insurgent will defeat the government forces. And in that case, they will even become the government of that country. A fourth way that could happen, again, it has happened in some countries, here I'm talking generally, is that the insurgents will turn into a political party and they will enter into the politics of the country and do a power agreement. The fifth way that could happen is the loss of support from the insurgents themselves and from the local community, and then the insurgency group will disappear. And finally, there could be internal fragmentation, where the insurgent group itself will start fighting itself, and we have seen some element of that in this. The best option that could happen for us with Boko Haram is that we wake up one day and we hear that our security forces have killed all Boko Haram members. But that is wishful thinking. It cannot happen. What is likely to happen is what we are seeing now. Some of the Boko Haram will be injured and captured by our security forces. Some will surrender. Some will will disappear and leave the insurgency, but come back into the society. Now, for a country where you have not been able to kill all the Boko Haram, some have surrendered, some have deposited their weapons, some have been injured and captured. Again, under international humanitarian law, once somebody surrendered, a professional military cannot line up those people and kill them. What option do you have? The other option, you could say, okay, take them to prison. But if you remember yesterday, I had the interview with Governor Zulum. He's talking about 300,000 Boko Haram. What is the feasibility of keeping 300,000 people in prison? Already we have a congested prison. And for how long? Are you going to keep them for life? And even that, if you are taking them to prison, if you want to follow rule of law, you have to take them to court. Let court find them guilty. We know what happened with some of the trials that were done in Kayenji. I think in one instance, about 600 were tried, but the court could not find evidence to pin them as Boko Haram, and about 400 and something out of the 600 were discharged. So why I'm laying this background is that as long as you don't kill a Boko Haram member in the actual camp of battle, if he surrenders, if he's injured, you capture him, you have a problem. Because again, the final way, are you going to take them to another country and say these are Boko Haram members, we don't want them in Nigeria? So it is for this reason that international humanitarian law, in the case of such internal armed conflict, where the enemy is also a citizen, it looked for a way, how do you end that conflict? That is why the issue in the Geneva Convention, Additional Protocol 2, specifically Article 6.5, it says, and I quote almost verbatim, at the end of hostilities, the government in power should endeavor to declare as widely as possible amnesty for those who took part in the decision. However, there is a caveat. The first caveat I have mentioned, at the end of hostilities. That is what hostilities have ended. The second caveat is that even though the Additional Protocol of Geneva Convention said this, it says the amnesty to be given is not a blanket amnesty for everybody. There ought to be investigation to find out those who are commanders, those who have committed rape, those who have committed arson, those who have killed, those ones, they will not enjoy amnesty. Those ones will be taken to court, and the court will sentence them to whatever punishment the court deems necessary. The ones that will, get amnesty, and we know there are classes like that, some that were abducted and taken into the bush. We have the famous Chibok and Dapchi girls. If we still have them, they might have gone and married terrorists, and we have seen, and given birth to them. And when you are capturing the Boko Haram, you'll capture with them. But certainly those ones qualify for amnesty. There are children that were taken with their parents when they were minors. Not that they joined Boko Haram. They followed because their parents were there. Even among the Boko Haram, from what we understand, they have people whose work is farming. They have people whose work is fishing. They are not fighters. These are the people, but only an investigation, a careful investigation can separate these things. So these are the issues that are involved. Now, I laid this foundation before I came to say how effective the deradicalization
these programs.
Well, experts in general, there are conflicting opinions whether actually the radicalization, which in simple terms it means changing the belief. Changing the belief, whether actually the radicalization works. Some experts say it works. Some say you cannot change the belief of an insurgent. So they brought another term, which they call disassociation. You cannot change the belief which is in his head, but you can change his behavior by making him to do away with violence.
Okay.
These are, theoretical debates on deradicalization, which may work or may not work. But when we come specifically to deradicalization, I have carried out some studies from the people that are carrying out, and I've also consulted for some UN agencies on the deradicalization, especially the one done by federal government in Malam Sidi, because there are two programs. There's the one done by the Defense Headquarters or the NSA office in Malam Sidi in Gombe State, and then there's the one done by this thing. So far, what I hear from the operators of this thing is that they do not have a single case of a Boko Haram who went through the deradicalization program that went back into the bush. This is what I have officially from them. So in that aspect, we could say that so far, and with the numbers we are seeing, we could say there are some successes that are recorded. However, the issue is, if we come to the technical definition that article, the article I mentioned in Geneva Convention said, could we say we have come to the end of hostilities before we declare this amnesty? That is a question that needs to be looked into. Could we say we have programs in place that actually separates the actual fighters, the killers, the arsonists from the farmer, the child, or the woman that was taken? Do we have that in place? These are questions that we really need to look to, because declaring amnesty too early or declaring a blanket amnesty, they have negative consequences. And we have seen that not only in Nigeria, in other countries. In Sierra Leone, where we have the same problem, after the Lomé Agreement of 1999, the government declared a blanket amnesty for everybody. That annoyed many people in Sierra Leone. And they declared it at a time when the rebels in Sierra Leone have not been defeated completely. And what did we see? The fighting took off again after the amnesty has been declared. So there's so much that later they have to set another international court for Sierra Leone to try those people, just like the Geneva Convention said, to try those people that actually committed heinous crimes. Again, we see, I know that is a bad example where amnesty was declared too early and blanket amnesty was given. But a good example can be drawn from Colombia. In Colombia, it was only after the signing of a peace agreement between the rebels and the government. When a peace agreement is signed, that shows that is one of the aspects of saying.
All right. Group captain, before we go there,
and the amnesty that was declared there was not blanket. Yes, right. Thank you.
So we'll get there in a moment. And thank you very much for helping us with the difference between de-radicalization and de-association. But I mean, sadly, our focus tonight is on de-radicalization programs. And, you know, many are very concerned about the effectiveness of these programs because some say one of the challenges with, for instance, Operation Safe Corridor was that many victims and members of the local communities were very hostile to the returning and, you know, call them repentant insurgents as a result of the trauma from their losses and on their perceived ground that these former fighters are incapable of repentance. And I wonder how true this is.
Yes. Again, it still has to do with what I am saying about separating those who are, for example, let's give a practical example.
Okay.
I do not think anybody in the Northeast will complain if they say, for example, one of the Chibok girls that has gone and given birth with a terrorist has been given amnesty. I do not think there's anybody in Borno, Adama, and Yobe that will complain. But it is difficult. I mean, it is a different case where somebody who is known to have attacked a particular village or killed a particular person is seen to be enjoying amnesty. So again, where you see you have to really compliment those people who drafted that article in the Geneva Convention. If you don't follow these things, these are things that are likely to happen. So that's another thing. Another problem is that initially, again, like I said, I have worked on that program as a consultant. Initially, there was overemphasis on reintegrating the ex-Boko Haram by giving them goodies, by giving them monetary and this thing, while the people in the community, because when they go to a community, they have their own camp, while the other larger community are seeing they are not getting anything from the program. But I think to a large extent, that was repaired, at least for the Operation Safe Corridor. It became clear that if you are going to give assistance to the Boko Haram ex-combatants, you also have to make sure that the larger community, in fact, instead of giving the aid directly to Boko Haram, look for an aid that will benefit the whole community. That is the only way you can make the people to accept. Because again, the de-radicalization and reintegration, honestly, it cannot work unless there is a buy-in from the local community. And the local community, you have to convince them that in carrying out that program, you are balancing justice for the victims as well as also trying to build peace. That is the only way it will succeed.
But Group Captain, would you say Operation Safe Corridor is a successful program?
Well, in terms of numbers of people that have come and gone through the program, I think the military or anybody will say it makes less work for the military. However, it is not a one-step something. Even after coming out from the Malan CD Rehabilitation Center, like I said, how you continue with the program of reintegration is what will ultimately determine whether we have a lasting peace. There could be a short-term gain. The short-term gain is people have surrendered. You have done the radicalization. They have finished. There is picture about them. That is a short-term gain. To build on that and get a long-term gain, you have to work seriously on the reintegration, on buying community support. It is only after a while, if we do not have people that are going back to take up arms, if we have the local community accepting the people that, okay, those that need to be punished have been punished, these ones that they were, we can say, victims of circumstances, they are our neighbors, they are our children, they didn't commit any crime, they are back, we can live happily with them, it is only then. So with due respect, when you say successful, there are short-term gains, and then there are long-term gains. Now what we can see is the short-term gains. But there are, steps that can be taken to ensure that we have a lasting peace. We do not have a relapse into, people going back into the bush.
All right, I get that. But let's go back to a conversation you started earlier, which is about how we go about these programs here and what is obtainable elsewhere around the world. Because I've had conversations about the inadequacies of Nigeria's de-radicalization programs, plans and methodologies. But based on your own experience, is it any different from what is obtainable in other parts of the world? If it is it okay to say that's the reason it has not really worked effectively here?
Well, like most things that have to do with security, there are global best practices. What do we mean by global best practices? It means what some countries have done, what worked and what didn't work. And that is why I set that foundation when I started with Colombia and Sierra Leone. In the issue of de-radicalization, demobilization, and reintegration, there are 2 or 3 country examples that are brought, successful to a certain extent. You will mention the one in Colombia, which many experts agree. It is not 100%. None of the, I must say that none of the 3 programs I'm going to mention succeeded 100%. But to a large extent, the Colombian example is cited as a good example. Why? Because the amnesty started after hostilities have ended, as was specified in that Article 6.5 of the Additional Protocol 2, which talk about they did it after a signed agreement between the government and the rebels. That is one. Secondly, the amnesty was conditional. It was not blanket for everybody. So for that aspect, people score the Colombian deradicalization at least 60 to 70%, even though, like I said, it's not 100%. The next example is that of Sierra Leone, which history showed us Nigeria took part in the Sierra Leone operation, peacekeeping in ECOMOG, and also the UN mission that followed on. We know, so we are fully conversant on what happened. In order to precipitate peace, we were in a hurry to get peace in Sierra Leone. So a peace agreement called the Lomé Agreement was quickly signed in 1999, in which the rebels demanded for blanket amnesty for all of them, and the government granted. This is contrary to the recommendation of the Geneva Conventions. And what happened? Because of that, blanket, that means those that kill children, those that raped, those that burn houses, all of them, they are to go free. Everybody was given blanket this thing. Unfortunately, because of that horrid, process, the fight in Sierra Leone, when we were thinking it has ended, the fight reignited several years after. It reignited so much so that we have to go and do what the Geneva Convention said. Because eventually, after the second half of the fight was quenched, there has to be an international call to try war crimes in Sierra Leone, in which it followed that Geneva Convention, where people were separated. Those that committed heinous crimes, some are still in prison up to now, as we are talking about. That is the second example. The third example, even though it is not an insurgency, it has to do with the South African Truth Commission. Again, also, some people were given amnesty, but based on the fact that you will come out and fully confess what you have done and seek forgiveness. So this, in general, when you look at the literature of demobilization, disarmament, deradicalization, these are the 3 examples that are cited. Like I said, each successful up to a certain extent. We do not have 100%. So it is within these 3 examples, what worked, what didn't work, that Nigeria ought to look at in fashioning out its own program.
All right, Group Captain, some Nigerians have always insinuated that our de-radicalization programs here are characterized by the difficulty of balancing the treatment of repentant Boko Haram militants and, raising the conditions of insurgency victims, which you've addressed. But it's valid to them because, they would never have a reason to believe in de-radicalization programs. Because according to them, government is yet to set up a well-thought-out structure for successful de-radicalization and reintegration of these Boko Haram militants who have surrendered, while guaranteeing the safety of victims that would coexist with the supposed ex-members of Boko Haram sect. But now with the intended expansion of this program to the northwest, some Nigerians are afraid that it may be a copy and paste situation.
Sorry, please, because of the, the volume of this, I didn't get. But if I can answer to what I heard, you are asking people do not have confidence in the Nigerian
in the programs.
Deradicalisation.
Yes. And because now there is an intended expansion of this program to the northwest, some Nigerians are afraid that it may just be a copy and paste situation.
Yes, what you said is actually true. When the program in Nigeria was, because it is an international something, there was international support and there are international experts. Some of the observations, like we're discussing since we started this program, they were raised early. But to be fair to the Nigerian program, as it was going on, it was taking some of the observations and correcting them. We have not got it up to now, we have not got it completely, but already some of the things we have already started, like for example, the timing. There are experts who were, you know, a bit skeptical about the timing. And it has to do with, has the hostilities ended? Okay. That timing people had problem with it. The second problem most experts had was, what is the process of separating that filtering of Shehu, who we know it was a fighter before he died, for example, versus a Chibok girl who was innocently taken where her parents sent her to school, and then she went and eventually she got entangled with a Boko Haram member and became. So again, experts were, you know, were not, like I said, I have worked on the program. There have been several queries at what are the methodologies that you deploy in actually separating the bad from the good. But like I said, there was also the issue, like I said, of being over-reliance, of putting too much importance. You carry, and for example, sometimes the Boko Haram repentants are taken to a town that is not even their own. They are kept in a camp, and people will see Nido, they will see all these noodles, they will see all these goodies going into the terrorist camp, while the larger society around is also reveling in poverty. So, but I think this, some of these observations were getting back, but by the time they were getting back, the program has been launched. So I would like to say for the Nigerian, that is both the one by the federal government and the one by the Borno State, honest, it is learning as they were going on. Okay. Learning as they were going on. That's how we've been. So probably the program is now better than when it started. Okay. But still, you know, there are still a lot of hurdles because still, unfortunately, the war is going on. People are still coming out. So I want to believe that what the people are doing is that with each batch, they look at what worked and what didn't work. And the international community has been very helpful. They give their own advice. This is good. This is not good. This is good. This is not good. And I think we are refining as we are going. But ideally, maybe at the inception stage, if we are taking some global best practices, maybe we might have, you know, avoided some of the pitfalls that we are saying. And also for the people that are having, you know, not confidence in this, yes. In fact, that is what motivated me as a person to come and be granting this interview. You hear people saying that this thing cannot work, just kill them. But I try to explain to people there are reasons. There is a law which says, and let me tell you, if you ask any military man, the training is, if you surrender, yes, you have killed my brothers, you have killed my soldiers, you have killed my officers, but the military training tells me that once you surrender, you have disarmed me. That means there's nothing I can do. Once I injure you, that is why wars are not like the wars of those days that do not have any law. There are laws now. And unfortunately, unfortunately, Nigeria has signed those laws. So a soldier or a policeman or a security man is also banned or Nigeria has signed. If somebody has surrendered, there's nothing you can do to him. All right. If somebody is injured, there's nothing you can do to him. If at all you capture him, he's a Nigerian, you cannot say, I'm taking you to Brazil or I'm taking you to Ghana. We don't want you in Nigeria. Right, you cannot do that. So it is a practical, you know, this demobilization is an answer to a practical problem. Like I said, if it were an international, if we are fighting with Cameroon, for example, we capture a Cameroon soldier, at the end he goes back to Cameroon. That is the end. They give us our soldiers, that is the end. But these people are Nigerians. You didn't kill them. So maybe I sound wicked when I say the only Boko Haram you really don't have a problem with, whether a soldier, whether the government, is the one that you actually kill during battle. If you kill him during battle, that one is meat.
And Group Captain, whether or not these people are Nigerians is also debatable because we've listened to some governors who have said these are foreign mercenaries. But let's take a break, and when we come back, staying with us on the program, our focus tonight is de-radicalization of Repentant, Boko Haram militants. And I've been speaking with Group Captain Sadeeq Shehu, retired. He's a security consultant, CEO, conflict security and development consults. Group Captain, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Let me ask you two very important questions, because some Nigerians also think these programs cannot record much success without addressing and resolving grievances and root causes of conflict via a process that involves all affected groups, which takes us back to dialogue. Restorative justice. I mean, it was just last week, it was reported that the SA on security to the governor of Sokoto State, and that's Colonel Ahmed Usman, called on the governor to reintegrate about 390 repentant Boko Haram members. But do state governments have what it takes to ensure the success of these programs? Second, who funds such programs? I mean, if you were to extend these programs in the Northwest, what kind of collaboration are you expecting from all concerned stakeholders this time?
Thank you very much. You raised a very valid observation. Honestly, like I said, just people going through the deradicalization in the camp, either in Malansidi or Maiduguri, and then returning them, is just the short term. It is a long-term process. And to be honest, it is very time and money consuming. In my own opinion, you speak to my own opinion when you said whether state governments can really shoulder the responsibility. I think the federal government should not allow state governments alone to shoulder the responsibility, because, to be honest with you, it is something that consumes a lot of money. And in any case, the deradicalization or the demobilization that is going on is as a result of a treaty which the federal government signed on behalf of Nigeria. That is most people forget that. It is a treaty obligation. So since it's a treaty obligation, I think the federal government should also have a hand in financing this project. Because like I said, after taking the people, because we don't want a relapse. We don't want a relapse. For you not to relapse, when you say somebody has been successfully de-radicalized, if at all he has been de-radicalized, he has been reintegrated, he has to have a source of livelihood. You cannot just keep him in a camp. 12 o'clock he will come and collect lunch. 8 o'clock he will come and collect dinner. Most people with pride, that cannot keep them as a family man. So you have to, the project has to be sustainable over many years, and the federal government has to come into it. You spoke about the advisor to Sokoto State Governor, which is my state. I missed that. But however, I want us not to mix oranges with mango. As far as Nigeria is concerned, as far as international conflict is concerned, the only armed conflict where Geneva Convention applies currently in Nigeria is what is happening in the Northeast. That has been declared both by the International Criminal Court in Rome, both by the declaration made by former President Jonathan, I can't remember the date, that Nigeria is at war. So the international community, illegal jurisprudence that has to do with war, is definite, because when you are judging this thing, you have to answer the first question. Is there a war? It's not every trouble that is a war. IPOB is not a war. Even the bandits in Northwest or in North Central is not a war. That is under the legal international humanitarian law. So when you talk about Sokoto, again, or when you talk about bandits, with due respect, my knowledge is confined to international humanitarian law, or what you call law of armed conflict, or what you call law of war. These other, things that are happening are not war. So this emphasis I'm giving on amnesty, as advertised by the Geneva Convention, it only covers the situation in the Northeast. Okay. It does not cover any other situation, whether IPOB, whether bandits, whether this, it does not cover them. Unless if there's a declaration that what is happening in the Northwest, what is happening in IPOB is a war. That's why it applies. So please, I don't want us to, it will not be right to just juxtapose. I have read that they want to do amnesty in the Northwest. But if you ask me, I think we are mixing two things. Okay. What the Geneva Convention talks about is about where a war situation is happening. There is no war in the Northwest. There's no war anywhere in Nigeria. The only recognized war, due to the declaration by the federal government as of that time, due to the judgment, the International Criminal Court has found that there is a war currently existing between Nigeria and Boko Haram ISWAP, though it is a non-international armed conflict. That is to say, the fighters are Nigerians, the security forces are Nigerians. And it, as of now, as far as the international community is concerned, the war does not involve any foreign country. Because if it involves a foreign country now, it will become an international armed conflict. All
right. Let's be clear, Group Captain. What you've said tonight is that thoughts of de-radicalization program in the Northwest should be abolished because it is not necessary. Is that what you've said?
No. The government has the sovereign rights. After all, when we're having Independence Day, there are people that are sentenced to death. A governor can say he has... government can write off any offense. It can write off any offense. But the problem of writing off offense is that you encourage impunity. You are not doing justice. You talk about restorative justice. The victims has to see that also his losses, if not completely returned, something is done. So that is the problem. But government can do it. But while we are doing it, why I'm saying if it is to be done, you don't compare it. Because we have problem of, people call it what-ifism. They will say, okay, they declared amnesty in the Northeast. Why are not declaring amnesty? I've seen people saying that. Why are they not declaring amnesty for IPOB? I don't want to be sentimental. I am a professional. What I am saying, the amnesty under Geneva Conventions is for situations of armed conflict, for which in Nigeria now the only situation that qualifies as armed conflict is the one that is in the Northeast. Any other, in fact, and whether something is an armed conflict or not armed conflict does not even depend on the number of people killed. Okay. There are, there are things that right now we're hearing that Pakistan and India have started fighting. One of them has to declare, I am at war with country B. Okay. Then the international community will agree. Then from that moment, the law that applies is the Geneva Convention. You cannot apply Geneva Convention for IPOB. You cannot apply Geneva Convention for the bandits in Northwest and North Central. That is just what I want people to understand. Okay. However, if government wants to bring something that they want to forgive bandits, it's a different thing. But it should not be as same because it was done in the Northeast. It's a different kettle of fish. It's like you're using a referee who is refereeing football to carry him to go and referee wrestling. It's not the same thing. All
right. Now I get that, and I think that's clear enough. But let's expand this conversation, Group Captain, because you talked about war. Because I remember the last time you were on Politics Tonight, I wanted to know if you thought Nigeria may be at war with itself and the impact that would have on how we go about trying to end these gruesome killings of our people in the guise of different names. There are Nigerians who say perhaps if we understood what exactly this is, we may take a different approach. What you said was that Nigeria is not at war. We've not just done the right thing in keeping the country safe. And I think you still maintain that position. But with Tiwa Danjuma's recent call on Nigerians to defend themselves, it says government alone cannot keep us safe. Do you stand by your words, so you would now evaluate the situation differently?
Even if it is students that are doing riots in a school, I think that is the most mundane kind of conflict I can bring. Once people are dying, it is regrettable. And the government ought to do everything to ensure that nobody dies extrajudicially. But having said that, you see, the law is the law. I am not a lawyer, but I'm an expert of international law that concerns armed conflict. This armed conflict, Geneva Conventions that we are saying human rights, it is divided conflict. There is conflict that does not rise to the level of armed conflict, in which case what applies there is human rights. But once it rises to a conflict, now then again you differentiate it whether it is international or non-international. We are cooperating. So I am not excusing or downplaying other incidents where people are dying. But the point I am making, you cannot carry. I started this interview by giving you why international law brought the issue of deradicalisation and amnesty for a non-international armed conflict. Because once you catch these people and they are citizens and you didn't kill them, there's nothing you can do. You cannot shoot them. You cannot send them out of the country. You cannot put them in jail indefinitely. So you have to do something. So it gave a window. What I am trying to say, we should not, because if there's any problem in any part of the world, in any part of the country, we are Nigerians. Somebody will say, In fact, already it is in the media that you are giving amnesty to these people. Why not these people? So I'm just trying to those that will try to understand that the amnesty in the Northeast is based on the provisions of the additional protocol, Article 65. Anybody can read it. You don't have not to be a lawyer. You can Google it and see what it says. So it is not right to say, okay, since they do that, Zamfara should also declare amnesty. No. But the Zamfara government has the liberty, if they think that is the right thing, to declare amnesty. But they should not say it is the same thing as the one that is being in there, because it is not the same. It is not the same. Absolutely. They are not the same situation. That is just the point I'm saying.
All right.
But no matter the loss of life, whether it is in a riot, whether it is in a school demonstration, the loss of life is always regrettable.
All right. And the second part of that conversation, or that question, was me asking you, has Nigeria's level of insecurity reached a point where citizens should now resort to self-defense?
Yes. Again, this is a very topical debate. And in my own opinion, I think the ideal situation, there are countries that, when we say, first, what is self-defense? Self-defense is enshrined in the Constitution. Self-defense, but even while exercising your self-defense again, you have to exercise that constitutional responsibility in line with other subsidiary laws. Like, for example, what self-defense means? If somebody busts into my room with intention of killing me, self-defense says that I can do everything to neutralize him, to kill him. But if in killing him, I already have an AK-47, which under the Firearms Act of 1958, which says I do not have the right to own an AK-47, then I have done the right thing in the wrong way. That is to say, the court will find me, yes, I've exercised self-defense, but by getting possession of AK-47, whether it was stolen, whether it was bought, I have broken another law.
All right.
So this is the issue. When people say people should arm themselves, yes, it is. In fact, it's not even a new debate. Every citizen, whether soldier, whether police, whether private, you yourself, me, myself as a private citizen, I have the right to self-defense.
All right.
If somebody approaches me in a menacing way, and I make the judgment that this guy coming to me, he's going to harm me. All right. The law does not say I should wait for him until he tries.
All right, Group Captain. Because of time, we're out of time.
Yes.
But quickly, does it look like we're serious about ending insecurity in Nigeria? Do you think Mr. President must rejig his security architecture? 2 questions in one.
Thank you very much. Again, here I will say, since the time of General Obasanjo, when he came back as civilian head of state, almost every government from that time has talked about rejigging the security architecture, because we are convinced, we have seen the reason, we have empirical evidence that the security architecture as is currently designed cannot answer to the security challenges of Nigeria. The inadequacy of the security architecture is what is bringing the shout for regional police or state police. If the architecture was fit for purpose, people will not be talking about that. Because I still come back to your first question, the ideal, though the ideal is never obtained, is federal government should take responsibility for security throughout the country. But we are seeing the ideal is not yet. And when people talk about security architecture, you are not only talking about the Army, Air Force, Navy, Police. No. Even the structures that oversight these agencies are not working in Nigeria. In the executive branch, in the legislative branch, they are not working. So when you talk about security architecture, not only how many police do we need is part of it, how many military do we need, how many intelligence do we need, we have not even done that. But also, how well equipped are our political masters, so that when the Air Force or the Army comes to say that I want this equipment A, who has the knowledge in the executive or in the legislative branch to say, no, this equipment A you want is not what is going to answer to Nigeria. It is equipment B. Who has that this in? There's nobody. Who has the knowledge to say, as of now, how many soldiers do we need? How many police do we need? So all this, when we talk about security architecture, it is long overdue. And every government, I must give it to President Obasanjo, he was the only one who started something concrete, even though he completed it. If we remember, that was led to the eventual leaving of service of later General Mali.
Group
it was
Captain,
the people he brought. But
we must continue this conversation some other time. I mean, it's a very, very important conversation for us to have at this moment. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've been speaking with Group Captain Sadeeq Shehu, retired as a security consultant, CEO, Conflict Security and Development Consult Limited. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.